about 9 minutes ago.
Here's some more paper.
I don't know
the paper.
Well, it should be sent out, so everybody has it.
Awesome. Welcome to the Octos finals. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Guys. Judge wisely. Don't spill food on your flow. Ortiz. Does anybody need a refill of the drink?
No, thank you.
Okay.
If I could get a decaf cup of coffee, that would be amazing. Thank you, I appreciate it. Y'all very a lot of hospitality here for the North.
Where are you from? If you start speaking, it'll come faster.
I'm just waiting for everybody to have it.
I'm ready. Everybody's ready.
Oh, okay, cool. Y'all got it up and stuff?
Yep.
Cool. Sociogenic processes have brought climate policy into a closed episcine by presuming biocentric rational Western man as the agent of knowledge and action. Climate analysts and environmental justice advocates alike have only ensured a rapid acceleration of technocratic colonial capitalism, which will continue to create ecological crises and decimate colonized communities only by eruption of the word or mythoid that we give in claps to auto-enforcement of the colonial order, which has become neurochemical drives or bios. This, however, cannot be calculated in advance, but must instead be a French phenomenon called a real leap, an imminent gesture produced through combat breath, creating an affective break in the superstructure of this atmospheric death, so allow the damned or the condemned to recognize the positionality in society as non-being only here, and the incomplete life death of strangulation and combat breath can be condemned, become the sword in the heart of the colony, virulent to all forms of colonial sociality, winter of 15. The boss class of Marxism and episteme functions the same as the classic knowledge system of life, which the way thinking is linked to the onward practical born climate instability, ecosystem catastrophe, the problem here began 1750 onward, 1750 onward, the date 1750 was the industrial revolution, what happened in 1950 post-colonial nations, from the mimetic tribalism, Bavarianism, the medically educated elites helped keep the empire going. The West had brought the whole human species into its hegemonic model of being human. This is the inactive, uniquely self-liberal model humanist concept of man as homo economicus. The report things cause global warming or human activities, but they're not all the Maasai who were and are being displaced have nothing to do with global warming. It's all of us, the Western and medically Westernized. It is within the law like epistemic terms of globalized homogenized model being human that the climate panel's report recommendations are generated. This means the genre-specific prescribed truth of economics can only be that of whole economics, a single absolute model framework in capitalism, and the mode of material producing. There's no absolute no alternative to planetary, ecologically sustained, increasingly techno-automated, post-industrial, climate-stabilizing, free market capitalist economic system, and it's now extreme neoliberal, transnational, technocratic configuration. The six movements are really for so many series, dynamic series of isms in order to challenge man's episteme, and momentarily they're making these challenges all together. But when you separate them, you regime the bourgeois order of things and emphasize Bavarian and travel, which we all fell. The authors report from the referent we, whose number of behaviors are strong, the habituality of our planet is that the human population as a whole. Therefore, the proposals are going to be devastating. We're going to proposals made from the perspective of Homo economicus, whose behavior is in telos, is precisely called the problem itself, starts to do with global warming, that we call for the transformation of knowledge, and the process is more complex than it might be here. Like bees in a beehive, we're normally conscious of the atmosphere which produce our very being. It is the word mythoid, the stories we tell, which produce the brain bios or the neurochemical patterns in our mind. Black students experience battlefield fatigue, and predominantly white institutions, natives are more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia and paranoia. The ontological realm, the stories we tell, these second codes that society's perpetuate become the first codes of our biology, structuring the neural pathways of your mind to a complex system of opioid reward chains, placebo to placebos and no placebos, ensuring the cultural conditioning through role and speech identification becomes habituated at the neurochemical level. In this way, the affirmative refusal of the state generally and the specific codes of civil dialogue, liberal humanism in particular, become methods not only phenomenological analysis, a demonic ground, revealing how affect speech become violent in climate discussions and in debate, but also serves to short circuit the normative reward system of the brain that habituate role identification and terror simulation colonial sociality. That is 115. As a species, origin emerges the wake of the human as a hybrid organism, gene storytelling species, bias with singularity, the co-evolution of human brain, the emerging factors of language storytelling are third and hybrid level existence. Therefore, debate specific there's rose new science of the word. The study of the word knowledge from the study of nature. The study of nature will be the study of emulating bias in the human brain. Here, the genetic codes and non-genetic codes emerge study of the word is the study of agents. They function according to the laws of nature. The genetically programmed biological genetic codes role bias with the hybrid cognitive neurochemical impact. The non-genetically charged stories of the dynamic emergence of the magic communities for respective ethno class nations, states, genre-specific subjects of each of the nations that are not able to subjectively experience ourselves and visually utilize terms as such can recognize member subjects likely and performatively enact ourselves as good men and women of our kind according to non-genetically determined set of symbolic life and instructions at the same time at the level of the bias, the brain, the above set of second instructions are neurochemically made flesh, the implementation corresponds to the laws of nature. First set of instructions, the second set of instructions to be alchemically made flesh are human social systems or hybrid language and storytelling living systems where they function according to the laws and analogous to the regulatory laws of the broader poetic system. I call these laws of hybrid human auto speciation. When we find these laws have been acted outside of our conscious awareness, we have faced a climate crisis, and which has become more important and imperative that these laws be no longer function outside of our conscious awareness, demonstrating human society order, you must look for the sociogenic principle. Once you redefine being human and hybrid mythology balance terms, you begin to understand the roles of such knowledge-making practices. Report to the genre-specific orders of truth, which in reality, these genre-specific orders of truth serve to motivate, semantically and neurochemically, the ensemble of individual collective behaviors need to dynamically and actively appropriate each figuratively made use social human social order as all the poetic, autonomously functioning, languaging, living system. The reproductive, respective truths of the knowledge system are already pre-specified by storytelling, charter of association, gender, welfare, code of symbolic life, death, as realizing the elaborate status of a system of learning, this overall epistemological order. This order certainly ensures that each genre-specific regime program of truth will likely function to semantically and neurochemically induce the performative enactment of our ensemble of always already a little role of Canadian collective behaviors in the flexible and subjectively experienced terms of commonly closed, autonomously functioning, higher living operating systems. Because for all such genres, so we're even more the same socialized and origin method, genetically encoded individual biological life intended imperative to take self-conversion, but at the same time be experienced adversely as symbolic death, this concomitant commitment of additional subject to making the dire for blue collections of life, is our work from we, the centrality virtually initiated and active storytelling codes, emerges here, the specific each kind, the positive role means directly made into living flesh, because of brutal war, placebo terms of the mode of symbolic life, described with the storytelling code at the same time. These subjectively experienced, therefore, more born of the purely biological life is memetically aversive, because they are doing so now in opioid reward block symbolic death, nocebo terms. And thus we find ourselves always grasping for an atmosphere which creates race from our bodies, for the condemned life is not a movement towards prosperity, but always strong against the atmosphere of death, and rejecting the colonizer master's cure, whether it be legal relief, metaphysics, or aid, is to reveal in our pathology the violence infused within the cure. As such, we reject the call to theology and orient ourselves towards the imminence of combat breathing, awaiting the event of the real leap, which consists in introducing invention into existence. Mariana 16. The cognizance of life is blossoming for a purpose stroke is an atmospheric death, this omnipresent death, which multiplies resistance, which refuse to life, but all too human response to the close contagious death, the resistance to colonialism is to marked by the incomplete life death. The colonized knows the promise to cure the law of colonialism reaffirms itself, whose resistance to life and incomplete death, their righteous with pathology, it was revealed as discourse of cure, which is the state of force and violence, some rotten between the racialized body and infused cure with that element of violence and compulsion, the atmosphere of certainty and uncertainty defining the body, affords an example of the sharp zero of physicity of the atmosphere is created in the body, which is blown apart, destiny, reassembled a body, which assumes affirmations, injury becomes unspeakable, somebody is born to disorder and a conserving dinner and conservative desires and those torture racing for the code of war. It is not easy to describe the only injured bodies that go versatile rather than structural not to decode but over right long criminality, resistance with the advent of decolonial war. The problem with this reading is the notion of resistance practice is telos rather grasps an event that deceives all such narratives. Also conceive that the incomplete death that seizes this life, this body is the very thing which refuses to be exhausted by the categories of resistance or pathology, federal means by the permanent hemorrhaging, which no one politics should say because the movie of this history, there are a few categories which essentially being dirty or hysterical, and to think of the body as individual breathing as simply aerodynamic the complexity of our argument, which understands breath as physical as well as psychological and spiritual. Sense that one's body is always a product of one's environment, thus the affirmative policy itself is an affirmation of combat breathing, the imminent phenomenon from which the lines of flight under atmospheric death are produced, and Act 213. And the maxim said is breathing not simply air that underlies the human being, an activity of breathing for physiological, psychological, physical, as well as spiritual life. This is the force of life force. What happens with breathing, drugged up vitamins, that this non-physiological starting unless one presumes breathing is one observed the colonists do not hear the breathing, the slave of the colonized stability, the colonized being, historically containing the solutionary writing that is ontology, annihilation, ontological suffocation. For this time, to disrupt the theft of air, vocal stability, violence is required. Decolonization is obviously a program complete disorder. Decolonization, the mean of two forces of the very nature of the day, the cellar old acquaintance back, without political, ontological entanglement, no coherence, the proper relations, derivative specific formations, direct force, unreal, theft of land, labor, the mere breath, and design, the ongoing relation of the pro-ecology to being while decolonization emerges out of these antagonisms, its constitutive energy is the combat breath itself, the disruptive force required for transformation of the technology of warfare. Right, talking not only to adversaries, but also to civil citizens who will not be killed except by advocating human race in the 19th century. We're not only a way of improving one's race, but a way of generating one's own race through material restriction and whiteness. But what is the temporality and spatiality of this race that will struggle for existence becomes just a tool in the hand of the racist, or remains justification now the base of slavery, colonization, and conclusion of the murderous state, and all one the same. The assuming biological function of the murderous state and colonizing racism, this is being able to track actual cause, turn upon the vital force to realize the ruin juridical humanity by suffocating those already dead deemed ecologies, colonized and slaves that got the production and generation of interstate structure, political ontology, the physical duty of the violence of the bodies, and the speaks repeatedly with an emphasis on critiquing the projection of growth like universals that are not described the world but are visions of the world, modern struggles of relations, practices, and plots working for the historical structures that are the one by ignoring the capital of the Western, not universally marked or universally practiced, nor is the human universally marked. Race is not generalized phenomena, but one that instruments life force and human existence, the murder of population, the realization of ethics, abstract the body by cleansing its carnality from its practical and ethical universe. He writes, I have no wish to be the fraud, a victim of the fraud of a black world. There is no white world, there is no white ethic any more than there is a white intelligence. I am not a prisoner of history. I should not seek therefore the meaning of my destiny, and the world in which I travel, I am endlessly creating myself, and I have the right to allow the slightest fragments remain in my existence. For no one reminds us that creating the world needs more than just work and epistemology. It requires hearing one's combat, but generating a copious flow of energy, transform one's fragments, sustaining one's existence. So colonize the world desires nothing but suffocation. Shout out to the 337. Mom, I love you. Dad, I love you. Gabriel, you're real. Shout out to Rachel Hurtado, keeping it down. She's the best. Love her. 337. Nice. Cool.
Yeah, my mom's not watching, so don't mind that. Okay.
Well, I think that question in itself kind of is contradictory to what our merit evidence indicates, that the attempt to answer that question will be an attempt to kind of decode blackness rather than overcode it. We think that blackness is probably a lot of things. Some of these might be contradictory, some of these might be unintelligible, but that's kind of the point. By overcoding blackness, we can kind of resist the drive to know that is indicative of like colonial violence.
Interesting. Okay, I guess the 1AC winter evidence talks about specific movements against the body, and I guess that with each moment of interaction or sociogency, that a body becomes like both physically and spiritually marked by those things. I guess how do we decide what a body is composed of? Like what a body has interacted with over time? Like what
Right, sure. So I think that question is, I mean, obviously complicated, right? It would require a lot of analysis. There are things that we can look at, right? Like one way that you could probably look at it is like, why do people in certain situations end up with like psychopathologies? It's probably because the stressors or the violence that they experience might produce that at a psychic level. I mean, I don't think that question's as easy as simply just being like, there's one method that always proves what the body is composed of. A body in flesh is obviously composed and structured by many different factors. So she obviously simply looks at the social factors that make the body.
What do you believe is the distinction between body and flesh?
Sure. So I think that the difference between body and flesh is probably one of coherency, right? So our argument is that the kind of blackness is in generally related to the category of flesh, i.e. it does not get the bodily coherence of a subject.
We probably say that there probably is no difference, right? So I want to add a corrective to that, but rather that the body is reduced to such flesh, right? This is what our piece of Agatha Andrew evidence and talks about, the way in which the self is possessed and the body
can I
is
ask you another
dispossessed.
question? I guess I'm curious, what does combat breathing do about that sociogenic process?
Right, so I think it's important to realize that combat breath is not like a political strategy, it's not like a praxis, it's not necessarily a form of analysis or anything like that. Combat breath is, as our natural evidence kind of cites, is kind of the constituent energy that fuels these types of lines of flight that are produced in a condition of atmospheric death. We think understanding that at a phenomenological net level
and that's what
is
you're
important.
talking about with non-sleep, correct?
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I think Darius probably has a better explanation of what he wants to say about
Well, the
sleep.
Phanonian leap is something that is a suspension of time, right? So we'll probably say that combat breath within itself, or the constituent force, the insertion of such breath in these debate spaces is probably one of those Phanonian leaps in which there is a suspension of time.
Okay, so that's what you'll defend, is that combat breathing is a sociogenic leap in the debate?
I would say it's a sociogenic leap in the debate. I don't think that's what combat breath is.
Yeah, I don't think that.
Okay,
Kind of
now
more
I need you
nuanced.
to answer the question, so you will defend that combat breathing is blank.
Okay.
Well, I guess
We'll defend that combat breathing is the constitutive energy from which lines of flight are produced under the condition of atmospheric death.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. 946.
Now what?
Oh, you didn't have to take breath for this session.
46.
You don't have to take breath for
You
it.
didn't have to take breath for it.
Okay.
So y'all got.
Y'all have 10.
Yeah. Watch out for that leg.
Yeah, these legs were giving me trouble, so I apologize.
Oh, this is awkward.
That's my recommendation. No, it's fine. This motherfucker, he's real
All right, it's just gonna be straight down.
What you say?
Just straight down. Like
Really straight down, for real. You know I don't trust you. Prepare with
everyone got it.
1 second.
All right, is everyone ready?
They got Cheetos? I need Cheetos. No, she got chicken fries. You said I need another pan. No, I'm not ready.
Oh my goodness.
Can we just switch those?
No, I don't do that.
You want a light blue one?
God damn it.
Brown?
No, I'm about to take milk. I'm about to
I lost all the good ones. There's orange if you'd rather do orange.
You got me for the damn orange now. Yeah, can I leave that like that? You can have this one. I'm good. I'm ready.
There's still be a Winter analysis of humanism as basis for their romantic liberation. This is problematic because Winters thought decenters, black natures, and reinforced the quotation for a violence of erasure, reject the one-sea scholarship for attempt to coherence of civil society. Cunningham 16. Her critique of Western humanism was that is based upon the ontological status of black is wrong. Conclusion when a drawing scholar, Winters thought such as the McKittrick, the prominent status of Winter series, the human within the black politics of scarcity, complex dynamic sociopathic poetic for she immediately engaged with inclusive self-reflexive illustrations of how Winter goes through romance and we are producing potentiality and assimilates with this gear, realms of the sense of growth before coherence less about providing explanation for black social living or trying to contain the socio-poetic forces in the modes of criticism range into potentialities rather than gather the hopes from one to altogether through the different hopes of what Winter attempts to battle and practice and seek humanness and self-love could be said about the limits of the scope of her analysis of growth for coherence and as Winter writes in relation to the plot that slaves grew food for themselves, his relationship with the land remained it was that of the past since house plots women were provided the African converted remained obstinately passive the condition of the possibility of preservation of the obstinate passive status of sexual economy, the proliferation of slavery and implicit naturalization of social reproductive labor with the intrinsic capabilities of women provided slave oversight the gender and sexualized labor in the plantation marks the limited winter conception and resistance to dominant code and climate, environmentalism, and the nature all parasitic upon blackness and slavery categories of both human and nature are underwritten more by fundamental antagonism between the slave and the world. Davis 66. 18th century witnessed the initial breakthrough between the biological science and system of classification where we define the lineage and define the description of actions as interrelated, vigilant, and government by caprici. They repeated the association of orangutan, chimpanzee, and currency. 18th century environmentalism, when the white man became human, nor the Negro was a deviation, and their reliance on sincere and negritude fails and transcends colonial structures, Jones 10. Negritude offer Africans the promising of becoming the traditional values of traditional structure myth and foundation position on unity achieved. We're not telling but specific to colonialization, negritude affected colonial stereotypes and values, not only transcended but the unity imagined the political opposition to colonial rule and negritude intends on reconnecting blacks to the excess rule cannot be influenced to their dialogue of European thought, which promotes that engagement and Caceres too interested in moderate European philosophy. This reliance turns salty because it reinforces colonial identity. Jones 10. Caceres understands incarnate through incarnate subject through first on the best of the inherited African subject overlaid by the European frontier. The negritude is possibly defined as uppercated by nouns, but the verb should indicate the negritude is not regarded as stated but as an activity. Self-exploitation delving into the unconscious and going on to self-subterranean journey. This memory identity formation is suggested Hegelian influence and negation design to destroy the negated element and instead of the quality preserve which is the part of the subject. Hegelian dialect does not seem to fit the experience of the African slaves in the New World. It's nonsense going to change the whip slave against the work as a vehicle for self-realization. And much of their whips and change necessary condition for the promotion of labor which the humanity will is to be achieved rather than preaching about saying that it should change the critical modes of practical labor. Since there's emphasis on transformation, cognitive modes Hegel's dialect to serve as a fire reforming desire Hegelian subjects not solutions to the sense of regaining the self-his own translated from city rather than the self-derived the negative evaluation to other at the beginning point. And black women are still captive, trapped within the black majors. There's no matter of liberal discourse on bodies, discourse on bodies or subjectivity that can free them from focus on unpredictable violation of the black female is the only starting point for politics. Fillers 87. The New World is a humanistic sequence the blood represents African people see the scenes of mutilation, dismemberment, and exile that fight the murders against the body of wealthy and violence, severing the captive body from its motives. The captive body becomes a force that is irresistible, destructive sensuality. At the same time, still time sunny contradiction of the captive body reduces things to captive sexuality provides that physical and biological expression of the other body. Sheer powerlessness insights into more general powers resonate with the various centers of social meaning before the body no fresh or degree of conceptualization is not to give the condemning brush of the discourse of flesh consideration aesthetic contemporary or discourse critical discourse nor analysis discourse with Africa female subjects historic conditions on them to weight, but also the topic that specifically externalized active culture and prostitution about racializing the unproductive female placement female gender offers a practice in theory or sex and living and dying the captive body version to the focus and gathering social realities in this metaphor that so thoroughly interwoven in literal and figurative emphasis the distinction between the virtually using this captive female body that's just liberating the ruling epiphanies and releasing the dynamics and name of the valuation remains grounded in the original metaphors and captive mutilation, the symbolic order and American grammar in the beginning, which really represent radically different cultural continuation of violent formation of modern African consciousness during the initial obstruction open Atlantic slave trade. And Winter's retooling of fan and theories of sociogenesis as bankrupt their scientific account of the humanist strips blackflesh and the experience of phenomenological encounter their dependence on scientific observation recolonializes blackness because it only understands the process of invention as transcending biological imperative. They immediately use fan as an instrument of transgression toward the essential utopian where the blackness is made present through the collection of data depicting the absence. Mariana 11. The view as a social contract among the laws of Basra has become popular being raised on there in the Western epistemology and according to Winter is a articulated the evolution term and contrast between the social principles hierarchical objects within the thing the modernity difference between which principle is essentially the use of fantasy of the evidence radical departure to potential social genius reverses the experience of consciousness non-reducible neurological processes Winter's formulations social genius were entirely combined to the strength and continue aware about the invention of constellation the problem has turned as the epoch rupture that allows to go beyond the current history of human. I don't think any return to represent association as a physical with all families. Carefully question that limited percent phylogeny onto genesis. They inversely reads for called misoptic description without harness of fairness, harness the findings of the natural science, including neuroscience, as a purpose able to transcend them. Transcend them in the terms of the senses. Winter never questions the implication of relying on scientifically determined concepts. The should be the black and white BSC and white W to be announced or reinvented ultimate science. Forming on this solubility early impact in futures and perfect the emphasis on ability at the level of psyche is nowhere. The more decentralized ideology masculine there should be there like an individual mega dimensions of self promises and land you must be intelligence of all the masculine dialogue and they're using historical instances of violence as a link their violence experienced by others is contingent upon non-participation in social practices. Anti-black violence cannot be evidence of historical things because its structural position continued outside of humanity, can create an objective non-conditional relation to violence. Wooderson 11. BLA or 66 operations, the largest police state in the world, subject to prioritization since one moving on the right stationary where about to the asymmetrical forces suitable red largest subjective is the vertigo of the member, the sensation only somebody spending otherwise stable environment perpetually unhinged with this relationship within the violence cannot be enlarged as objective vertigo the like considering disoriented and structural as opposed to the performative violence black subjectivity the intersection of performity in the structural violence black sentient beings of the non-human suffering human sufferers contingent violence of violence kicks in when he where resist or perceive the resistance disciplinary discourse in capital N or obedience with the black people's assumption of the assumption of violence paradigmatic destiny to stand up performing contingency political political ontology just radically from the political ontology of a sentient being who is constituted by discourse and listen to violence like he or she breaks it with the ruling of discussions of human revolutionary so however subjective vertigo market subjective vertigo. Famous colonial overthrow the mass can never include the black subject. R. James evidence is hella good on this question because fans of colonial overthrow simply reinforce power structures. James 13. The problem is difficult to identify because it requires time and space, momentum, and force, moments that transform the intellectual and organic intellectual revolutionary colonize, resist no return to the people each person shuts himself off subjectivity, rebellion, electric cranes, familiar terms is trained by the ruler, brother, escape dark, revive the foes, every fosters, alteration of call for calling rebel, intellectual family, obligation to sustain the mass people, market, people. And, Our alternative is to reject the affirmative in order to focus on the unflinching paradigm analysis that begins at captivity and non-consent that calls for the end of America. Wooderson 10. I begin to see how the unflinching paradigm analysis is could be overthrow the existing or neoliberal compromise and radical element of church with mainward through our inability to win the style of the martyr feed of the part of the political and predict on the unflinching paradigm analysis and rely our energies to be displaced on the pragmatic consideration. I'll finish reading now. James Scott here. To share the same body, sufferability, victories, remove targets, colonial subject, racism, repression, insecurity, disinsincerity, art, authenticity, negativity, present colonialization, the man, native intellectual mitigate, claiming colonies and rebels to interpret these, translate meaning, desires, intent, and a degree of this one does not struggle to be common like the other natives, one struggles to be connected, the other natives are uncommon, common natives are saying they'll share one cultural blackness, that heroes and emergence consciousness, no politically under that, right condition, everyone to be murdered.
I'm sorry.
Do you want to mark the version?
Yeah.
It's marked at murdered, I think, right?
It's marked at murder, but I also marked the Wilderson card at subject to vertigo, but I'll send a marked version of that.
Okay, cool. I'll wait for that before we do serious.
Thank you.
Okay, my first question is about this Jones 10 evidence that's kind of talking about negritude, right? I guess I want to know what the link between negritude and Cesaire's study of the word is.
The study of the word, the evidence indicates that Cessaire thinks that through the study of the word or prophetic life, that there is a form of that there is a form of apocalypse to come. That's why he says that there is the end of the world. That's
Right. I guess my question is in the context of the winter evidence. How does it? My context is in the context of the winter's deployment of the word, right? Is something that would shape bios. I get that, like, you know, like Cesaire himself might have been invested in this type of like apocalyptic word. But my particular question is, what is the link to using the study of the word to understand how the bios is formed?
No, that is our argument, is that other people studied Cessaire to say that end point or the telos at the end of the world is good. Actually, winter starts from the bios and the relationship to the world. I mean, no, there's not a fact.
That's fine. That'll be the debate. My next question for this Wilderson evidence, kind of talking about subjective and objective vertigo, right? How do we kind of understand violence, or like any type of violence, if we can be like, yeah, you see, this experience would be a moment of the deployment of objective violence? Can we point to any moment of violence to understand how violence happens?
Right. So, yeah. I mean, Wilderson is specifically talking about like violence that happens to subjects that have like who are sentient beings that have.
Yeah, like I get the difference between subjective and objective vertigo. My question is like, can we point to any moment of violence and be like, that's, you know, like that's worth thinking about? Or is it always, is like pointing to any moment that violence has occurred always, you know, a link to this?
We think that the act creates a form of historical aphasia because your attempt to label things, for example, 1750 to 1950 as a clear explanation of the ways in which, for example, industrialism created a new epoch that we need to come to terms with, which is what Winter bases her idea of sociogency.
Okay, yeah, sure. That makes sense.
Yeah,
I think Darius has a question.
I guess, then does power ever shift? Are there changes in the way that power operates via anti-blackness?
It's not a question of are there.
Well, that's my question.
No, but I'm saying that there's something that gives the power intelligibility, which is our argument. So there's something that undercodes the ability to exchange or manipulate power. Your argument is, does whiteness shift? Sure.
Okay, cool.
So
then
I guess what was that other explanation, or what does that mean in the context of the affirmative? Because I guess that's just like abstract theorization. I want that back.
I'm abstract theorization. No, our argument is that the affirmative engaged in a process of attempting to explain or analyze the ways in which history has led to a place where we should engage in a quote-unquote leap, or a leap away from imminent, or an imminent
Okay,
leap.
my last question, just before it gets done, is that Fanon is one of the people who critiques Hegel, right? He's like, the master doesn't want recognition from the native, he only wants work. So kind of, how does this James 13 evidence operate in terms of its critique of the Hegelian dialectic?
All right. Well, the link to Cessaire is that your understanding of like.
No, this is different thing. But
are you talking about the Jones?
No, I was talking about the James one, but it's cool. We'll take part right now.
Your stand break again.
Sure.
Sorry, I didn't mean to like throw it. Like.
Oh, I did. Oh, I didn't get none of that? No. Bruh, come on. This just still out of state burrito.
I'm gonna do this.
Nobody go right.
what's this?
Like a small fried rice. I didn't use small fried rice. Like vegetable fried rice.
Yeah, it's all of that shit. There's just no rice. It's everything.
Small fried rice.
I don't like those things. The other all the greens. Just like sour cream and all that. That's why it was kind of weird because I was like, they said you want rice with me. Why didn't you say so? Oh, I didn't know.
He doesn't have a phone.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. We'll try it. If it has, I think I can run and get another one.
Would you go like that?
Yeah, like, there you go.
You got the movie?
Yeah,
I'm not doing it.
oh my god.
I need my car.
You sit up, you got the
Send the G-Jerks.
Oh, no, she doesn't. Is that queso or salad dressing? That's really big bottle of that. It's just like, I think I'm saying that I think he had salad.
Oh, you can stop right. I'm sitting out the speech stop.
Alright, so, I'm trying to put together this stand for you real quick, Darius.
Unless they come to
first off,
please don't be first. I don't mind straight. I don't want to hurt you.
Where you're trying to speak? Right here? See if it stays stable for you.
Right next to you.
see, that's it. That white woman said,
Yeah.
Finish your laptop
I was about to say that could have happened a lot later.
It's tricky.
Or broken.
Yes.
That sounds so impossible.
I guess if we're going straight down, we can just go straight down.
Straight tap it. See if it falls.
We almost fall. We're gonna be on my misfortune. This is
I have the gym stuff, whatever you want.
Just put it right here, man. I have that.
You want brown?
I have one, I don't know where it went.
a shout out real quick though. Shout out to the 318. Shout out to 337. Shout out to the 504. Shout out to the Bay. Holding it down, you watching this round. Shout out to Brittany Planks for helping me. For real though. Shout out to my mama, shout out to my brother, shout out to all my cousins out here that helped me get here. Shout out to Dr. Lupe.
And your number 3
Shout out to Jasmine Taylor, they out here killing shit, you know what I'm saying? Make the Bay pretty again. Shout out to Taylor Bro, shout out to the panel, shout out to this team. Honestly, shout out for real. Oh, shout out to Nico's mother and father. They helped me get here. I wouldn't even have had an apartment if they wouldn't have sounded like close distance. For real. I wouldn't even be here. For real. Not really.
Shout out to Gabriel Juarez.
I got to shout out everybody else. I mean, shit, I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for y'all being able to carve out these spaces.
I'm starting your timer.
Huh?
Don't start it because I don't have a
There's no hard.
No, this is just.
There's a pen right there.
You replaced the.
We're already running 15 minutes.
Don't hit the table because your laptop may fall.
I guess I'll go ahead and start.
Wait,
Please don't start. Please don't start talking.
It's right here.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I'm gonna start my time. No heart. No young savage.
Okay, that was good in terms of recording.
I think if we're just flowing straight down, I'm just gonna move straight down. But the case page is, I guess, the app is gonna be first, then the criticism proper. And I'll assign those two. Let's get it. The affirmative use of breath and atmosphere gets as an analog for corporate life, energy, and global warming reveals fundamental, and also these detach the alternative fundamental unique claim to the way that climate change operates. Our winter evidence, which we will probably both agree on, that climate change is sociogenic, not anthropogenic, as the antagonism with nature is between some unified human and anthropos, but instead the superstructure anti-black colonialism was categorized both modernity and black population objects to be used and enforced to participate in the structure of the environment through the myth or the creation of the universal truth, which I really don't understand that sees their links, but we will get to that later. But the anti-black colonialism required the colonization, death of our own space, the recognition of the white master. B, mind meets atmospheric death, aka power functions, the production, not in genetic order codes that alienate the subject and occupies the ability to produce meaning, train, and transmit meaning. Not theorization of power begins from a sociogenic approach of sociology as a study to how cultural values develop in social and political spaces that impact how bodies and language express and interact. An argument that sociogenic violence overdetermines social and political relations via the scandals, gratuitous, mundane violence of the white that steals the breath of the slave and creates a form of mental or a form of mind that mystifies the paradigm, reaccumulates the afterlife of slavery through the myth, or specifically in the context of rhetoric or language that gives deposit into the psychic space of the source spot at the level of flesh through the process of epidermalization. I don't know if that was too abstract for you. That renders black and colleges dead and brothers obvious to be extended repeatedly. As to say for white subjectivity, this replicates and reproduces modes of social death that justify the destruction of the spaces of the lower wards in New Orleans to maintain stability of white spaces such as the first quarter of the displacement of Chicago ghettos and the condos and even the first quarter, even the concept of first world nation which requires using second and third world in colleges collateral jam with that I can thank you to Winter and Marriott evidence. Now see, you can start this argument whereas you're gonna have to rock with me real quick, as I told Kevin before, rock with this understanding of how we're gonna be explaining combat breath. Our argument isn't that combat breath is something you can decide as Eric Garner or Sandra Bland and now wake up the next one and they're thinking that their last breath was gonna produce political gestures such as I say her name or I can't breathe, but that will reveal the rigid structures, atmosphere, death, and allow for this some sort of collective affect in which we all understand the way that this atmosphere is not separated, i.e. debate is not separated from the atmosphere around us that produce these colonial spaces. Our evangelical evidence provide a fundamental unique question about the imminent nature of combat breath and immaterial life force that exceeds metaphysical notions of positive that can only be traced after they occur, which is why debate is unique, because as in an imminent space as you judge, you can only flow my arguments as they present and reveal themselves, which is why experience of phenomenology is exactly our argument. Combat breath is the existential resistance that constitutes that's the constitutive of black life, and anti-blacks always try to reduce blackness to the flesh, to the body, to the soma. The insertion of breath is the thing that emerges through the antagonism is always antagonistic toward anti-blackness or white life, as the police officer tried to choke Eric Garner, they tried to choke Sandra Bland, his iteration of I can't believe, their iteration of saying her name while being choked, serves an imminent resistance that continually asserts blackness as life, blackness as a life yet to come, even if this atmosphere is always one of death, or this line of flight is snuffed out. Our black life is the antagonist, the force that has value, whereas our piece of academic evidence states that one, not a prisoner of history, one should not seek there for the meaning of my destiny. Breath is the analytic, prevents the occupation of breath that allows one to preserve the terrains of existence in a world that desires nothing but suffocation. It is through the confirmation of this incomplete death that seizes this life, this body that recognizes the fluidity fluidity, power, and how it forms the atmosphere that produces the possible lines of fight through its fixture to ambiguity. And it is the breath that is not yet taken, but a breath that is taken by power that refuses to be seduced by that moment of occupation of breath. Instead, the affirmative shape backs that corporal life energy and dwells within this liminal space that recognizes the permanent hemorrhage of the body or endless power resistance of the body in which no all power resistance can stem from. That's a piece of myriad evidence that this insertion of breath or bodily resistance or somotechness into the symbiotic space of debate that uncensures the very attempt to repress the corporeal life energy of the black and colonized, which is the reason why that we are probably a necessary prerequisite to lead to the alternative, because we need these forms of combat breath to insert these spaces to be able to try to grapple with these coherent grumblings of suffering, which is to allow for the criticism to even be spoken in these spaces. Now you can go to criticism alone. Permutation do both in turn combat breath through the multiple points of resistance, which constitute the embodiment of the zone of non-being for the enslaved and the colonized that blurs the line between the self and the other. At their piece of James evidence would like to classify and also be the antagonist relationship between the slave and the master, what allow for the paradigm to reaccumulate itself to these forces of power. That's our piece of Agilangelo and Winter evidence. Also to the solves the criticism of the act. The only way to resolve this criticism, because the pathology of the colonized can be ruptured by the signifiers of temporality itself. And also their whole argument is a walking double, so you can't read Marriott, you can't read Wilderson, and you can't read your piece of James evidence as Marriott would like provide a criticism of the way in which ontology operates. I'll get to that also argument later. But also too, you say that racial capital and also the argumentation to overshadow racial weight, but then you read an unflinching paradigmatic analysis and analysis that understands about the way in which racial capitalism operates in these debate spaces. If there is a question of flinching in this debate space, it's probably going to be the best for the negative argument. Also too, our piece of Marriott evidence talks about the flinches are something that is always inevitable, as if there's not a refusal to life, but they'll move away from this type of contagious death. Now I don't know if that would abstract enough, but this is a double turn to all of the argumentation. You should not let them get away with this shit. This is an independent reason why they are the re-replication, the re-centering of civil society and their position on ontologization of slavery, and reaffirm the sentiment of moralism which structured anti-blackness in the first place while walling in despair, and would turn their own arguments of understanding Marriott. That's Marriott 12. Wilson's conception of anti-blackness, the major structural antagonism, is against the concept that racism can never be continued on black experience. The problem is that it remains at a piece of Nietzschean imperative that be said, and we can only confirm these imperatives as absolute rather than chart a path beyond them. And so far, there's no outside to black social death and alienation, no outside to this outside, and all thought the mirror's own enslavement. Not so much Afro-pessimism thought is wedded to his own despair. There's always the desire to have the black lived experience named the worst. Such a desire collapse into essential moralism. The black has to embody this abject without observing the denial of any ontological integrity of the black slavery, reduced ontology to the logic of non-recoverability. The blackness and the absolute outside can only reify this void at the heart of universality. The chasm between human life and black death relies for reassert the endless non-relational absence of blackness and reduce the race to a logical non-relational. This transcendental loss of black suffering and fundamental absolution and moralistic, and also Marriott doesn't really agree with Winter's reading of sociology media. It's just how she historizes and understands its origin. And when they see Marriott evidence is a critique of this telos argument, you should be able to understand the affirmative just not as two pieces of evidence, but rather as a whole entire narrative about how the story of combat breath is not locked into a telos, which is why exactly I'm arguing about the way in which we should overcode blacks. It's not a form of decode. That's just Marriott and 11. Let me first say that I don't think Winter's reading is simply tedious or inaccurate. Sociology shows how modern self oscillates between two singly naturalized sets of such about what it means to be human, while but non-sociology refers to how the human's inferiority comes to reading biological, solely racial, economic terms, non-finding the precise meaning of addressing and critiquing racism and discourse of time and the failures that are object to his study, and also permutation do both the affirmative I make that argument above. The affirmative is not I'm tripping. The affirmative is not it's not a normative affirmation or negation of social life, but rather the paradox posing the question, what does it mean to live in death? If this incomplete answer, more specifically, what life mean in the context of death, rather than viewing that affirmative through prescriptive claims as celebratory revolt against anti-blacks. The affirmative reverts and pathologizes revolt itself, curling up with its own pathology in a way to stay within the whole of the ship. This is not a temporal understanding of the lines of flight, but rather the temporal suspension of this line of flight that is Harmony 16. In the wake of recent onslaught of black death, the murders of black men, women, and children have been circulated and witnessed by millions. This over ever-growing archive of black death is an outcome no different than the decision in the case of two black girls. In the case of two girls, no one would ever be convicted or held responsible for the murders of these searches. Led me to revisit what was possible in a slave ship on the border of a slave ship. Our president makes two appear. There's no space outside the threat of death, so we make a place. We take a place. We make outside while we're healers and captives on the inside. We hold these deaths in our bodies and our songs. Create a way to celebrate the lives and memorialize the death of those ones we love. We never knew these prices did not occur, did not and do not occur
outside the zones of anticipating premature death. They did not happen in safe places, but they're here and now where we are in a time and place where we're refugees or temporary. Our mourning will not wait. It cannot be deferred. This is a great paradox in play. How is it possible to entertain the ideas of care, love, and regard and confines of extreme and normal violence and slavery? This question will require me to recalibrate and imagine differently collectivity that emerged from the holding line of thought that is made possible to discern potentialities and capacities residing along the shift, and you can mark it as shift. Now, you can look to this piece of Jones evidence. It's an argumentation about Caesar, but no link for two reasons. The first piece of Jones is about negritude, not the affirmative. Negritude is a literary and artistic movement, not the one seen also from Fundonian understandings of negritude, which is a separation from these understandings of simple affirmation of negritude that can just rise up and pull themselves up by the bootstraps. That's a piece of Marriott evidence. Also, too, there's no link either. Our deployment of science of the word is not toward the telos of the end of the world, but rather the understanding of how the word shapes the brain. This is not aimed at the populace, but an informative project. You should have read this against Wakestaff. Now, this piece of Spindler's evidence that talks about the way in which the black matrix should be specifically locked into a telos, or how we understand the root cause debate, where this is not a power versus power debate, but the way in which these theorizations of power actually matter, and what does it mean to use a theorization of power. This is just an abstract concept, but also to this Spindler evidence doesn't really talk about that the black matrix should be the starting point. You should call for this card at the round. It just said that there's a violence that happens against black women. Okay. You good?
Yeah.
Okay, it was just permutation to both. Because you said it twice, and I just there were two different ones. Okay, cool. All right, so can you help me understand this Marriott evidence? So I'm kind of confused on why Marriott is a double turn to Wilderson, or that understanding of like political ontology.
Well, Marriott would like to provide a criticism that's based on the idea that black social death is something that can never be seen outside of humanity, right? So this is where Marriott provides this criticism, or a Fanonian criticism, of understanding ontology within itself, that is solely pessimistic, that it cannot understand lines of flight that are produced from these sorts of social death.
Also, to build off of that just briefly, the Marriott evidence is very clear that what Wilderson is articulating is not an ontology, but it is a logic that functions throughout the world. This is distinct from an ontological framework. The evidence actually goes pretty in-depth, describing the steps that Wilderson takes through his Lacanian reading to understand how does like blackness get from where it is to being like, you know, non-signifiable and things like that, or being subject to previous violence. But he says that's located within a kind of logic or a process, and is not something that is locked within an ontological position.
Also, too, our argument would be one of phenomenology or experience, not one of just
cool. All right. So how does combat breath? How does combat breath? Give a better grammar of suffering?
I guess. Well, that's our argumentation of sociogeny. So combat breath would rather be the advocacy, or the quote unquote, I guess, a debate solvency mechanism for right. Sociogeny is the exploratory power of this grammar of suffering. So I guess if you want me to answer why combat breath is a solvency
my next question is like, how does sociology explain things like reproductivity, the black matrix, that side of violence? How does
sociogeny?
Yes.
Well, sociogeny is the idea that codes are placed upon bodies. So then if bodies are scripted a certain way and viewed or interpolated by specific bodies, then that would explain this argumentation about how black women then become sexualized in the status quo to these norms of reproductivity, to these norms of hypersexualization, to these forms of violence that are, Winter evidence would probably like to state, that there are non-genetic codes passed on through the socius or the white.
So how does your understanding of power understand that though? Like your understanding of like captivity, reproductivity. That's just an explanation of like how sociology works, I guess, in relation to black matrix. But what does combat breath do to like, I don't know, forefront that?
Yeah. So I think that the sociogenic analysis is important insofar as it understands things like generational trauma. So the way that the specific social codings of black women, right, throughout time that have subjected them to like higher rates of sexual violence, right, is something that prones bodies to more traumatic experiences that have not lived trauma yet. So trauma is passed down cyclically. Sociogeny understands that those second codes, right, of being traumatized become the first codes of biology and become passed down. Understanding why black women can be traumatized by sexual violence that they have not phenomenologically experienced is important.
say it was bad. I just said don't be surprised.
Q, since everyone's out, do you mind if I run in some coffee real quick?
Absolutely not.
Thanks, appreciate it.
I heard you that.
If I drink caffeine, the most caffeine I can.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's gonna help, but it's not made it worse.
Risk it? Alright.
Do you have a doctor?
I do not.
Cool.
Enough cards in this one.
It shall be just like the order of the 2AC. It's just going to be the order of the 2AC. The permutation will be in the one another.
Are there any colors?
No.
I love these debates. It's got a flow.
Actually, wait.
My little old finger. Got 3 of these debates.
6, no, you didn't. 6 or 8. No, you didn't.
That's not the purple one?
Yeah.
This one you put that whole contraption away.
Tell her to put it down.
This like a whole thing too. And I both hands. That's also one man.
Pretty good day. It's been a pretty good day.
No.
It could be better.
Okay, 518.
What kind of TV?
I make
Were we right about 2?
No, we had 437.
Oh my goodness, why you keep up with your nose and people's stuff?
That's no. Let's see first of all.
Second one.
Just ready for my food and drink. So why would I
So,
put something
407.
Okay.
We have 407.
2XC.
First off, sorry, that
Order of
was
I'm sorry, 2XC. Order of 2XC with the perm.
Straight down.
I was confirming the perm.
And I confirm
was
you
talking
should.
to her. Thank you. Hi.
Hi. Okay. The top of the 2AC proves solar link argument says that climate change is a process of corporal eugenic climate change, that it's the anthropogenic, that it's not anthropogenic, sociogenic, which attempts to displace responsibility, say the responsibility is on us of white people because of the relationships between different times and space, 1750 onward, then 1950, post-industrialization created a process sociogenic, where bodies from Marxist deviant henceforth were capable of existing near spaces of pollutants. Our argument is that it's not a science, it's rather a system of anti-blackness which creates mastery, and henceforth pollution is diluted in areas where black bodies are. The climate change is rooted in the oppression of black people. Anti-blackness is an admission that was produced by whites who created and compounding massive amounts of CO2 and pollution that contribute to state sanction. Environmental violence, especially racial formation of land establishes segregated land patterns where undesirable elements were pushed to black people were reminded to stay in their place. It's not a positivist scientific explanation of violence, but rather an explanation of cultural causes that, like, to certain degrees, it's just to certain varying degrees of CO2 in the air, which is what I'm going to impact on when I get to the winter evidence. But this is not a fucking scientific argument. It's a rather an argument about the ways in which cultural causes lead to more pollution in more areas because of state-sanctioned violence, because of an antagonism of anti-blackness that remedies certain bodies as deviants and henceforth relatable to certain forms of environmental degradation. Second of all, you don't solve the climate. I'm not sure what they think their app does, other than have a thought process about bodies and one in which we can question Fanon's leap and say that combat breath is a way to engage in those forms of politics, while conceding that the top portions, the winter nor the Agatha Angelou evidences are not contingent upon the affirmative. You have an argument about the ways that sociogency is important, a reason why those things, sociogency shapes bodies. You don't have a reason why we should engage from 1, the Anthropocene, 2, why conversation the Anthropocene is relevant, 3, why the app engages in scientific positivism, 4, why you don't begin at captivity, and 5, why the fuck you try and obfuscate all 2NC offense by reading Marriott when you've read Double Turns to yourself. Their next argument is about you needing to run with them. Their affect is predicated off of flesh. Our argument is not that we can reanimate the flesh or create new symbols upon the flesh, but rather that blackness is the thing that gives sociogency its meaning. I think that this should be pretty clear in cross-sex. I think it's pretty awkward when I ask what blackness is, and the answer I get that Nick gives is we should contextualize a lot of our links. They say blackness is constantly changing, answering, and attempting to overcode itself instead of decoding structures. That's why we have to continually resist blackness and resist the drive to know. And it's that indicates as a product of the indicate that it's always a product of the colonialist world to try and explain blackness. The answer for Marriott is fucking simple. Blackness is pathology. Blackness is. That's why Fanon is violent and traumatic. That's why the leap for Fanon is violent and traumatic, because it's not a leap into a new understanding or new idea as they like to place it, or even a transfer where we hold the fucking leap. It's a traumatic experience for Fanon where he realized that it's in that moment that he's pathologized, and henceforth there's no escape because he leaps into the white gaze. It's his fucking argument that there was nothing that he learned from that interaction, but that it was pathology. In that moment, he realized he could never fucking transcend, which is the reason why Marriott reads Fanon and says that that's why we have to begin from black pathology at flesh rather than pathology within the world, which is the reason why Spiller says that we have to begin from flesh, not social practices. I'm going to make this clear because I don't think that the app is making an argument. Marriott says that people like winter equal bad because they're humanists, and I'll explain that in great detail later. But the app says that we should engage in a politics of combat breathing. Agatha Angelou's conception of combat breathing is one that says that we have to resist the political structures of the world, right? That we can engage in a colonialism in the world. I didn't want to say that the opposite. In the world, because we can engage in combat breathing, one which reinserts ourselves as malicious against civil society. Marriott's conceptions of anti-colonial politics are through an affirmation of pathology, not through a reclamation of animations upon the flesh, which is our argument about why pathology has to begin at flesh, which is what they would like to call phenomenology, rather than engaging in a politic of scientific positive explanations of sociogency. We shouldn't try to explain it in terms of science or as a scientific fact or a proof, which I'll get to in a little bit later because it makes shit super eugenicsy instead of just being like, there were cultural causes to shit and that was bad. The next argument was, I think that this can be contextualized in the context of their police versus I can't breathe violence because it explains the ways in which we try to attempt resistance within the world means that black people never get to die because we think that echoing the words of people past their deaths or in their moment of atmospheric terror is an attempt to reclaim or an attempt to connect spaces through life and death rather than a realization of blackness as pathology, shit like Attica prison rights, etc., where black people affirm black pathology is a lot different than affirming blackness in relationship to police violence or resistance, if that makes a lot of sense. Does that make sense? You should affirm the radicalization of death is quite a bit different than saying I affirm resistance as pathology. Those are two totally different statements. Their next argument is that they leave a flight from humanity, that they create a flight because of secured humanity. I think you should look at the slippages between the middle of the 2AC and the middle of the end of the 2AC because I think it proves all of our link arguments because he continually repeats that they're a flight away from existing structures and that this flight is possible because of their resistance, and at the end of the 2AC he realizes his slip, and that's why he said that it's not a resistance from the structures, but rather it's not a flight from the human, but the process of, but he explains it as a process of flight that holds the flight there, right? That's why he says, like, oh wait, no, it's not a leap into something new. It's a leap itself. We just sit in the leap to understand violence, which is our argument about the slippages between the 1AC and their ability to explain a solvency mechanism and the ability to say that they affirm pathology. Marriott, pathology. Their solvency mechanisms say that we need to radicalize the pathology. Their next argument is about embodiment. I think that I've already made it quite clear about why embodiment of flesh is different than signifiers. They explain blackness as the signifiers rather than blackness, the thing that gives the signifiers itself meaning, which is our argument. It's not that blackness is the signifier that can be circulated, but rather black bodies are the signifiers that can be circulated upon a grid of flesh, which is our argument about the way that power operates, that they can't come to terms with nor co-op. If we win that there's a discongruency in the F theory, that's going to be a large part of the win in R, but I want to make it clear if we win that there's a discongruency in their theory. It also proves that their ability to call themselves a narrative and henceforth to co-op certain parts of the alternative is impossible, especially when they've said that the 1AC is an artifact and a speech act, that we should view it through his explanations, not just the explanations of, I don't know, Winter in a broad sense, but your 1AC was a speech act. Winter gives a description of violence, and I'll use my last bit of time to explain why that's bad. Listen, Winter fucking sucks and creates a form of science positivism that's terrible for black people. Winter thinks that the fundamental antagonism is one between blackness and nature, proven by the concept test to understand all human social orders who must, but therefore think of sociogenic principle. Goes on to say that the new purpose of Cessier's new purpose of the world, such as science, would be defined as a study to the world. To the word cannot determine the study of nature. This implication is the study of nature. This will now be specifically a study implementing the bios of agency of the human brain. Okay. We've heard it's not a question of are you Cessier, but you create new genres of an antagonism that begins at sociogency, which is the problem. It's not animations upon the flesh we disagree with, or should not occur, or sociogency in a broad sense, but rather positive science that Winter and faces racial rape for focus on racial capital. Henceforth, the affirmative gets consumed in ways they don't intend. Look at me at the end of the debate and tell me that eugenics isn't something you should reject on face. Look, at the end of the day, the logical result of the plan could be white people being like, black people have cognitive disorders because of slavery and racism and poverty, and henceforth are more likely to commit crime because of the relationships they experienced to the literal places that they lived, because it literally marked their brains in a way that was necessarily different from others. For example, and that's just like a logical leap, obviously, but there are ways in which when we explain something as science-based and we say that sociogency is a model for science rather than of just cultural causes, it then is justified as an actual science.
You say that an affirmation of pathology is good, but then later on the Winter evidence says that when we use science-positivism, it creates eugenics in which they are viewed as irrational. I guess my question is, why would an affirmation of pathology not be the same as the colonizer looking at that body that's affirming that pathology and saying that they're irrational?
Because there's a difference between a dance with death and someone who affirms pathology. For example, there'd be a difference between the situation of Eric Garner if he had went to the cop and shot him and the cop shot him back, and then someone dying from a gratuitous form of violence. We think that you articulate your act through pathology as in the advent of white people making you criminal, not you criminalizing those structures and henceforth breaking through. Those are two different worlds, different things. It's a huge difference between orientation towards death, which is all of the arguments for why it's important to affirm pathology, to orient ourselves towards death and then radicalize the flesh against it.
Sure, and I guess I'm trying to ask, what is that difference? Because our affirmative is trying to state that I can't breathe is that dance with death. So I'm trying to get where that logical
No, our argument is that your explanation of solvency is predicated off of the inability for black people to die. It means that it is coherent because people can read empathy into the situation and say, I can't breathe as a place for people to politically mobilize. That's what you say. You say, I can't breathe as a space for people to politically mobilize.
Okay, I guess my argumentation is, why do you reduce the affirmative down to that simple nuance? We're in the 2AC.
Okay, my friend, that was a large fucking part of the 2AC, and you made like 2 arguments. So if I want a link, I want that you we win a case turn. That's just like
I'm trying to figure out where the link argument is. I'm trying to figure out
the
where
link argument is that the affirmative engages in a politic that begins from Winter. Winter gives a clear and coherent, rational description of the ways in which the 1750s led to the 1950s, and then black people were marked as in their space to nature, or fundamentally antagonism between nature, rather than one of anti-blackness. You say we need to affirm pathology. We think that you begin your pathology from the relationship of climate change or anthropogenic scenes of anthropogenic climate change, a sociogenic process, rather than one at captivity and flesh. We think Marriott says that actually starting at captivity and flesh is necessary. That beginning from
Marriott says that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, touche then. I guess my argumentation then comes down to the question of, what is an unflinching paradigmatic analysis?
Well, I actually think that the text of the alternative is a little bit different. We say that an unflinching paradigmatic analysis that forefronts captivity and non-consent call for an unflinching to demand the number. I don't remember. You can read it specifically.
Yeah, I'll read the tag. I guess my last question is.
But what is that? Would be like not do the act, affirm pathology, affirm black flesh as being. I think that I spent like
pathology?
3 minutes. Is it? No, that's our argument. It's blackness.
Blackness is pathology?
Blackness is pathology.
So then why is the affirmation of the 1AC not blackness?
Because it's not a question of are you blackness, it's that you're corrupted.
So then
that you have a disease
if that is the truth,
because it attempted to rationalize and humanize itself.
If that is the truth, then I don't understand if we are blackness, how are we not affirming the pathology?
No, that's my argument, is that you don't allow for pathology because you put us back in the world. You don't criminalize blackness as flesh. You rather attempt to animate it in political spaces. You give it rationalization and coherence by your reading of the Winter and the Winter and the Agathangelo evidence.
Well, then I guess so.
I mean, I'm positive. I know you read the card because it obfuscates offense. We think that we can take the offense.
I don't know what we're doing.
I think that's like 30 seconds. I thought that they were taking time to ask me more questions.
The cards have already been sent out.
Four or five.
I see that. Yeah, they're already sent out to me.
I'm about to connect back to the Wi-Fi. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you're
kicked
good.
off.
No, you're good.
Password to this
I think the username is debate17 and the password is like Hilton17. Yeah.
Okay, man. Is Hilton not capitalized? Is lowercase?
No, I think it's everything's lowercase.
Okay, thank you.
I'm not about to play this game.
I don't think that was a thing.
At all.
It was. Okay, I got it. Thank
Okay.
you so much.
They're ready? Oh, it's the permutation. Alright. Is everyone ready?
Yep.
There are a couple theoretical framing arguments at the top of the flow. One, permutation severance, they win the perm stalls up because they shifted their theory throughout the debate. Now, this moves on neck offenses now. Don't let them know, not our combat breath out of the link arguments. Now, first of all, the second is that they don't get any permutation. They should hold their arguments in this state move again. Test the method of production of scholarship. Now, they shouldn't get points for good enough. Now, it also forces blackness, compromise, and potential whiteness. So we win, if they win, some part of the AF, if they win that, if we win some part of the AF isn't good, or their understanding and analysis is incorrect, the permanent eliminates all offense for the negative. Now, at best, the permutation is just a recognition of the whole. They don't dwell in. Now, you should conceptualize the one that sees the intellectual artifact. They don't defend the USFG, which is important because it allows for direct analysis of anti-black violence and black politics, about bullshit politics, expansion process of counterplays. Now, this discussion can only be informed if the affirmative defends the performance, discourse, and methodology of the 1AC. Otherwise, the affirmatives can simply say we already did that in the 1AC, and just in arguments made without being forced to consider their political implications means that the AF doesn't get a permutation. That means that the AF doesn't get permutation because part of all political engagement. And the permutation is also another because it's part of the traditional USFG plan debate and historically anti-black and the shift to focus debate and responsibility of the one they say this after permitting reproduces anti-black practices and prevent analysis of anti-black violence. Now, the only impact you should filter your battle around and see what James called this Spiller's argument about the black matrix and forefronting how racial rape gets overloaded interracial capitalism, the understanding that the black women are held in non-consensual captivity of racial rape, and the perm is an active erasure that performs violence to the black matrix. Trudy 14. Racial origin is not a resistant action. Resistant black women are not it's not termed to be expendable. The scholarship of black women is purposely on the appropriation black is coming to a product scholarship of black women is purposely race domination of race. Example of the black women's knowledge is from it's not about the knowledge of order. It's pop culture. It's black experience and culture, primarily female anti-oppression, cultural practice, erasing the cooperative generation of the masturbation of acts violence. Why must black women be liberated from anti-oppression through the proper for expression and oppression through the experience occur. Reducing black into the mere protection. Ability of healing all persons, black women remain as not persons in. I'll answer the weird double turn argument here. First, they say there's a double turn between James and Watterson. Everyone's one. This is nonsensical. James is not it's not in conflict with Watterson. We say that black women are in the alternative. Yeah, we also didn't read James. Also, the alternative text is about captivity, not necessarily James's filtering of gender. I'll answer Marriott. Marriott is a self take out for the permutation one. When he sees a double term, Marriott criticizes Winter because her new synthesis of anti-blackness is a sociogenic problem that relies on scientific truthfulness and justification for its accuracy. This moves towards the genetic role of phenomenology in structuring anti-blackness combat. Itself is a struggle for perfection. This attempt to sustain anti-colonial resistance doesn't allow for the blackness to fail. Now, there's no double turn with the Regenberg, Willis, and Marriott. One, the link is specific to the indicted Winter. That was above as well as the double turn cross-examination links back to Winter's understanding phenomenology. Now, the second is that Marriott falls in line with the specific Wooderson argument. We have read in debate. None of the 2AC arguments were about the anti-blackness structures. None of the arguments behind anti-blackness structures high theory bullshit. They don't get to see there's a difference between theories in general. Our interpretation of theories is our reading of the one to see comes from Marriott's difference between ontological and ontic violence. Ontic violence and Wooderson overlooked. We say that our case paradigm analysis refuses to place blackness on the flesh. Captivity is then fleshed, and the piece of James says that blackness is different. Colonialism and the after Marriott evidence agrees. Yeah. Oh, there's a clock there. Oh, I took him. I'll read them out in the email. I took him out of the doc. And there's a framing argument, Merritt and Dacaluch have radically different interpretation of decolonial violence. Negative violence is a true affirmation of pathology because it abandons the desire to counter hegemonic struggles. The written rebuttals attempt to narrow the one AC only affirms blackness as pathology, severance, and the Af conditionality, Merritt at 11. One common misreading of violence is the Hegelian struggle with progressive purpose and making that common subject of recognition rather than things to not recognize the balance is the human fundamental category of the human being. Decolonial violence engagement to detoxification, eradication, and the process of decolonizing can be identified through politics, but language is being ready likely to the programming of the judgment to back into the play without jurisdiction in the moment. Intervention is an event which appears and sees the representational forms of political decolonial violence plunges the and they are a Hegelian struggle, and that literally describes combat prison as an attempt to wrestle for life in political struggle against the colonializer vote. Negative on presumption, if we prove their one see performances inconsistent, means they haven't met the burden to prove that goal is 11. Feminine understands combat prison life struggle with the slaves and continue with the foreign violence combat. Racism in the past remains after slavery, nor the intercolonial violence, but living practices constituted and involuntary specific people's having to articulate the common presence race life and existential structure dealer. The daily pulsation of context that disfigure the antagonize and present the market states in their annihilation the struggle of combat practice and deform the order of the rest for life. Yeah. Oh shit, not my dog. Now, you hold the line here. We don't have to do intricate explanation of the difference between Lacan and high theory, Lacan and Finney theory. They haven't answered. There's no offense answer to the W turn argument in the 2AC. All he does is say that there's a W turn between Wilderson and Marriott. There's no actual answer to the Marriott card itself. That is a complete indict of Winter. They conceded this offense. They conceded a case turn. You can vote next on presumption.
Cool. We have 608. We'll take that starting now.
Or we can wait too. Okay, I'll wait.
Stop. Breathe.
What's the job like? 3 minutes. Oh yes.
Yeah. I don't worry.
Are there any? You have to like scroll up and hit like it's in there, but
No, that's
I'm sorry. Could we? I'm about to take start right back up one more time.
Okay, start now.
I'll just pull it up.
253. That's hard. Got it. 253.
Four.
Not quite enough.
Oh, I took it for a cigarette.
I feel like there's a balcony in
There is.
There is.
There's one
Actually,
like
really
out there.
beautiful.
There's that way.
Yeah.
There's
No,
one
that
that
one.
way.
Oh, that way? I used to track with the AK?
Alright.
Yeah, that way? That nigga track with.
As you can see, you're not gonna respond.
Yeah, you are good that way.
For me?
Yeah.
That's the threshold.
Alright.
It's a no.
Almost kicked us in the other.
He look another response that way.
There he is. There he is.
Okay, check us out. How about that?
I'm going for my
You can catch me outside too. How about that?
Right here. Right here. Accountability, right?
Dr. Lupe, they being mean to me over here. They talking about catching them outside.
Did you miss the part where he said, how about that?
Exactly.
You can rewind it.
Thank you.
It's a thing. You can go to the tapes and you
Check your messages.
Check my messages? Okay.
And everything that is not really hard.
Damn, I have to get my water.
I know you didn't step on my skin.
I'm gonna stand for it.
It's pork rinds.
Oh, it's pork rinds. I didn't do that. I don't like pork rinds.
I'm gonna trust you. Especially when like my mom. That's like my first love.
Why do you keep talking about that lady mom?
I'm not. Her mom is beautiful.
What's getting yours?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Me and Kevin, it's repairable. It's repairable. We're done. No.
Come on. Come on.
Look at that.
Really good.
I'm looking for this pork.
I know her.
I followed the order. I didn't have an overview. I just grabbed it. Not at all.
I'm so excited to get my meals. I like that. It has a sweater.
Yeah.
It's like a sweater slash. That a button up or just.
No, it's just that it's that.
I might need to snag that from my day.
It's a little crop, so that. I mean, you can do it.
Brittany has been telling me, shout out Brittany, that I need to bring back male crop tops.
It's not wrong. It's not right.
It's not wrong or right.
Yeah.
In between.
Yeah, that's what I like. All these lace things.
Good.
say necessarily as an I will say but I don't know if I would say inevitable or it's not.
All parties accounted for, all the babies here.
You got blue pen back?
Yeah. Sure.
These aren't. Never mind. That's
Y'all
not
ready?
That's just whatever.
Alright.
It's from the other thing, but
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a line that I'm gonna read because it matters. Cool.
It's like 5 words.
Yeah.
Alright.
Well, it's not just the highlighted part, it's the
Oh,
whole thing.
cool.
Let's get it. Yeah, I sent out some lines. It's not just the highlighted part, it's like I'm reading the whole underlined thing. But that's all that matters.
Let me eavesdrop.
Not me.
You don't need to eavesdrop.
Are we good?
With this eugenic shit.
Nah. Cool.
Yeah.
Unconditional.
Oh no.
I know.
I'm sorry, speech time. Let's get it.
Alright, cool. It's basically gonna be like, block order. Stop. Okay. Oh, hi. Cool. I'll push it down so I can see you better.
That's what she said.
They say it's a question of end of blindness is not a science, but a culture. Yes, that is our analysis of the winter and evidence to the way that cultural formation shape bodies at the bio and physical level. This is the question of the way the muscular tension arises within the native with the type of psychic flesh requires that when you have an anxiety attack, your heart beats faster. It's the type of response that cultural phenomena have on the body. Now, the next reason common brother day, they lead those reasons. I'll do that one now. No, it's not a science. The traditional empirical positivism of the science of the areas and the way in which we can analyze the way that the words in black's bodies and how the word is created over time. The second is that this sociology is understand the black natures because they understand it's necessary to understand the way the cultural codes shape black women in particular, which is why our method is at the level is at a higher level of analysis. Now the next level is that there is a question of the number of Marriott does not turn this. In fact, it is a question that they can see the Marriott 11 evidence indicates that he is not contesting that Winter is wrong about our sociogenic analysis, just that she is a comes to a historical moment. But this is why we have the Marriott card that talks about the leap that needs to be made as a change corrective. Now the next argument is this type of blackness is pathology, but if blackness is pathology, pathology is blackness and race a tautology. The reason this is fundamentally unknowable is because you must overcode the narrative. What is pathology? What is blackness? The overcoding is key to this narrative that they have no realistic tautological answer. They just say that pathology is blackness, but blackness is pathology. Blackness just says this is not a definitional answer because it is impossible. Marriott claims that the decoding of blackness is violence itself, which requires a overcoding. Now the next argument is this type of the pathology of the flesh, but it's what now the next argument is that Winter is human as no. Marriott agrees with that. The work about these common brothers say politics no, it's not a politics and energy. They try to make the inactive evidence. I can do it too. Here it is. I articulate common brothers into a struggle that bring to the infinite and the finite that comes through the monolithic process. The common brother of the living disrupts and exceeds the dominant implicit spatial schism of ecology and body, sovereign subject and its soma are flesh, person, and living being, the phenomenon, the nouna, and political projects of academic orders means that it's a oversimplification of what it is. You should look at the inactive evidence that the constituent energy of decolonization itself is the combat breath. Decolonization is not combat breathing. The energy that produces is combat breathing. Now the next argument is that it's echoing, but it's not an attempt to reclaim, but rather a way that the I can't breathe to reveal the rigidity of the structure. This is a phenomenological analysis. The way that operates. The next argument is this type of flight of suspension. This is just because she says that it doesn't make sense to her. Does not mean it's not an argument. The suspension of the leap is necessary because it suspends it outside of time and history. It is always a movement that is both movement and not movement. This is the paradox of overcoding that when Marriott says we must overwrite the notion of complicity and add it upon blackness. The next argument is this type of this congruity, but I'll ask for them on the permutation. They say excited. I did that work about they're going to say this eugenics argument. This is ridiculous for two reasons. One, it totally disavows the way in which cultural processes create violence upon black bodies to the level of the somata, which is a concession of the somatechnics of the body because it does not understand the way the cultural context influence the biophysical. Two, it presumes the notion that white people will do this and somehow is this not already in the status quo, that white people already make these biophysical claims. Is a disavowal of the gratuitous nature of blackness that is always already pathologized. The fact that there could be a eugenics against blackness and somehow is not the status quo is a ridiculous and a disavowal of the paradigm. The second argument is that racial rape and racial capitalism. One day, Spill's evidence literally says that they are not analysis of, they say they're not analysis of gender but racial captivity, but there's Spill's evidence says they focus on black women and gender as well as the Trudy evidence is a double turn of the conflation of gender and racial captivity that becomes a type of double turn of their argument. Secondly, they can see the Hartman 16 argument that indicates that this is a question of how do we live, which means that this is not a question of the what best analysis you're going to have, but a question of how do people live within death. Our Hartman evidence indicates this type of relationality does not take place within any type of space or point of life, but rather is in depth. Now the next argument here is that the outcome is more to the brain. I did that work above. Now the next argument is that permutation 1, there is no severance. The literal argument is that there are not competing analyses. Phenomenology and ontology are not procedural or sequential, but rather they influence and act upon each other. They are parallel but not sequential. Now secondly, this is not a severance argument. There's not one part of the 1EC we will defend, but rather it's a question of reading the 1EC as our holistic artifact. On the next argument I'm going to go to here is that permeate is the limit its office. No, I don't think it does. I think it just means that you actually have to have a link to the affirmative. That's not just we didn't say the things that you said. This is a limited debate. Now the next argument is that this assumes a USFG paradigm. This is fundamentally false. It is a question of whether or not our analyses are different. You can be completely right at the ontological level, but that does not contest the phenomenological analysis that we're making here. Third, this assumes an attempt to impose coherence upon a discussion upon black scholarship that can make it coherent to the rules of debate. This is a form of epistemic violence that dispels the paradigm. It's a move to coherency that decodes blackness rather than evocodes. In American case, this is a form of violence. Now, there's now the true evidence of race of black women. This is fundamentally false because the notion of sociogeny is key to understanding the way that black women become specifically situated within social and cultural codes and how the situation becomes implemented at the neurochemical level. And the next argument is that there is not a company that's a form of captivity, but one, this is fundamentally false. There's a concession of the Marriott. I love that evidence indicates that it is not an ontology, but it's a logic that Wilson reduces to. This is a thesis turned to the entirety of the affirmative because the negative, because they cannot win any claims because we have indicted that there is an ontological theorization of blackness. This has been termed because we indicate that their ontological theorization is simply a logic. It is not is a process that has been logically understood, but is not one that is locked within an ontological realm, which means they're completely wrong about their powers. You have to win at a base level that blackness is ontological in the first place to be able to make these claims. The Marriott evidence indicates that Wilderson and the like reduces to a logical non-regroupability that attempts is rooted in a sentimental desire to see oneself as the worst. That is the interjection of the superego within the black body that creates a notion of desiring for pain. Now the next argument is the type of criticism where they work about. They say Marriott falls into the line by ontological bias, but no, their Marriott evidence is not correct in this instance because the Marriott evidence that we have corrects this type of notion of the what?
Go to the permutation.
I already did the permutation.
You make the argument about
Oh yeah, this is the reason we have access to permutation. Permutation have benefit for two reasons. One, it allows a phenomenological analysis that is key to understanding how we operate in these spaces. Secondly, it is a ability plus. Secondly, the sociogenic analysis is key to understanding the Black Matrix project. Third, they have conceded that resistance is inevitable because flinches are inevitable because of the way that it becomes interjected in the body creates a muscular tension is the all too human response, which that Marriott indicates. Now this means that this is the double term because there is a type of intellectual purity that is impossible, which takes out the alternative, means that permutation is the only way to solve.
Yeah, I'll email it to you.
like, you see how they doing me dirty? You see how they doing me dirty?
He told me to catch him outside.
She said she was gonna fight me in the middle of the speech. She said she wanted to fight me in the middle of the speech.
Lupe, he also said he was gonna fight me. Oh, wait, I don't even think about the fight because I already know the conclusion of it. Which is why I thought it was see around how I know about this.
So you gonna give me a black eye?
What part of black eye?
You said you gonna look, she gonna beat me up, take my money. Look, I'm shaking right now. Wow.
You're shaking?
I'm so scared.
You should be scared. Why are you scared?
You said I thought you said I should be scared.
I did. No, I'm asking you what are you?
Scared I might get beat up.
That's why you're
Damn, then I'm just not feeling the injuries.
Yeah, that's what you're shaking from.
Exactly. That's your shit.
How about that?
Yeah, you gotta like, don't be afraid.
I really never had a problem because they wanted to, but we settled it the next one.
Okay.
Oh, it was like that was
Okay.
alright.
No idea why they spent so much time on the alternative. Not very good at finessing, but it's pretty clear since I'm live that I'm going for a pick out of the one he sees reading of the winter evidence, because the winter evidence explains sociogency as a form of scientific positivism rather than an explanation of social causes. I think you have to look at me at the end of the debate and tell me that social causes is the same. That scientific positivism saying that people literally have neurochemical changes within their fucking brain is the same thing as having different levels of stress, etc., etc., etc. Their argument is not that stress doesn't lead to that stress doesn't lead to like bodily violence, but that the fact that they explain sociogency as a form of in a form of science sutures itself as a dialecticism. Their evidence, the piece of Marriott evidence they read, says that dialecticism is bad, affirming blackness as pathology good, which means if we win any link to them recuperating humanism through their reading of the winter evidence, it's a reason to vote either negative on presumption or the pick if you think that like phenomenology itself is important, because we just have to affirm blackness as flesh, which does not necessitate it can affirm sociogency without saying that sociogency has to be linked to scientific analysis. Okay. The example that they're talking about what they concede of the Davis evidence, which is that science acquired black flesh as a thing from which to experiment the entire process of nature itself relied on an already existing process of slavery, captivity, commitment to black flesh already clapped into a natural science that's historical and practical matter. Why environment is talking about what affects us all rather than focusing on the problem that exists between both groups of people. You can avoid talking about race at all and end up talking about the agonistic relationship between humans v. nature, which is what their reading of the winter evidence leads to, because it allows for forms of humanism. It says that the problem has been created through one of sociogenic processes in nature because of a form of anthropogenic climate change. We need to switch the understanding to a sociogenic climate change that it can account for the antagonism between human and nature, not blackness as being. I'm going to slow down because I don't think that they're explaining a lot of arguments in this debate, and I think that these arguments need finesse. They say that at the top of the 1AC, they say that their reading of the resolution is that they refuse certain parts of the resolution because of the relationship that black people have to atmoterror, which is the Agathangelo evidence. Their solvency mechanism is combat breathing. They say that combat breathing is an act of phenomenology, or what happens after the ontological event. Our argument is that phenomenology is talking about flesh being, the Marriott evidence talks about phenomenology as in affirming black people's relationship to flesh. It's ironic that he spends time saying she just says blackness is pathology, because our argument is that your desire to explain or give more meaning to blackness as pathology is our link, because the affirmative, which is what I explained in the 2 and C pretty well, because the affirmative attempts to recuperate, rationalize, or give a coherent line of thought for how blackness has been treated in a certain way. For example, the idea that we went from 1750 to 1950, and that we can draw historical lines and then say that since that is true, it must be true that there is a sociogenic process that we can attempt to explain. That is Winter's argument. Yes, they are correct. That is not Marriott's argument, which is the reason why you can vote negative to endorse Marriott's understanding of sociogency and phenomenology coming from Fanon, and disagree with Winter's interpretation that says that since the advent of capitalism and the advent of a historical lineage that we can clearly trace, we should understand through a scientific model of sociogency. There is a very big difference between sociogency in terms of affirming blackness as pathology and saying that there is a scientific model that we should attune to. I know that this sounds a little bit repetitive, but it internally turns all of the affirmatives offense, because it means that their attempt to hold these two paradoxical things in tension with each other disallow for blackness to ever engage in that affirmation of pathology. Their understanding of Fanon affirming himself in the leap is bad, because it assumes that the leap was where he got his understanding of the world. The leap is the paradox because he realizes that he can never escape the gaze, right? That's why he thinks that we need to reorient ourselves towards death. The 1AC says, yeah, we agree, we're reorienting ourselves towards life, and life is within the death. That's what Hartman says. That's a terrible reading of the Hartman evidence. The Hartman evidence indicates that death, right, that there are certain ways to have social life in social death through an affirmation of blackness as pathology. We agree that the entire thesis of the act, or the rhetorical artifact of the affirmative, meant to say something. The problem is that it didn't. I think they concede a presumption argument from the one and R, except the Hegelian struggle, the Agathangelo decides combat practice in an attempt to wrestle against a colonizer in the counter struggle. Again, here's a line from the one and R. Combat brother is not an event of the path, but remains in slavery, nor the end of anti-colonial project, but living practices constituted involuntary constrictions of specific people's lives. You can vote negative on presumption. If we went with proving a link to the Moisey's performance is inconsistent, they even met the burden of proof. They conceded that Marriott, framing Marriott and Agathangelo have radically different interpretations of decolonial violence and negative violence. Negative ballot is a truer affirmation of pathology because it abandons desire of counter-hegemonic struggle. They don't get access to the permutation. You can't permute a fucking double turn with the affirmative. Our argument is that you should have just read Marriott, that your 1AC did need to include Winter. You don't have a defense of Winter. You don't have a reason why Winter is good. And no, we should not say that the act just gets to defend its intentions of what they wanted Winter to say. Winter is specifically talking about things that, they make a uniqueness argument that says that, like, if people can, that blackness is always already pathologized. Our argument is that you have to escape to the flesh before you can affirm pathology. You don't just affirm pathology as being, it's not criminalized. It's relationship to whiteness.
Cool. 252, starting now. I have the extensions. My computer's fucking up at the level of like. No. I have the extension for you. Okay, that's perfect.
About this today? Okay. Thank you. And you can also message her communicate with her, I am or whatever, let her know that you Okay, I got it. So let her know that you are that you know. Okay, thank you. I thought he was saying that I needed to talk to him. I was trying to say for what you let him do. Okay.
I took the grilled cheese test. I forgot. Well, yeah. I just realized we're also being live streamed. I want you to look at me and stuff.
I mean, I put it in the board. I think it's fine. I just put it in there. I just
Yeah.
appreciate it. You want the
When you said it, I was like, I have a friend named I was like, not talking about him.
Nigga straight down?
Oh, wait, we missing Will.
Huh?
We missing Will.
Oh yeah, sure.
Blue pen?
You can have the blue pen now, it's over.
I don't know.
Were you around here for this? I think no, the camera's actually behind, and that's the microphone.
Bro, that's you out there commenting on the post. Kind of wrong.
Take off the camera. I thought you stopped by.
Whenever you're ready. You ready? Alright. Okay, yeah. Touche. Look like y'all say if you're ready, y'all don't be winning no games.
No. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Alright, I'm about to start, y'all. Alright, let's get it.
As colonized bodies, our relation now to the topic is one of pollution. Civil society has criminalized our existence in the same way the resolution calls to criminalize certain GHGs. Our myriad evidence say that the very air is not neutrally empty, but rather filled with violent antagonists that constitute the very superstructure of the atmosphere around us. The basic statement through continued re-articulations around our winter evidence described the auto-speciations of ontologies, epistemologies, metaphysical notions of intentionality, coherence, and structuralism, such as the construction of completely pessimistic claims provided by the negative, such as the argument that resistance is not possible because it seems to animate the flesh, which conceals the phenomenological or experiential responses of the untimely gesture toward the indescribable shock of the revolutionary moment that may not constantly occur, and demand the attempted grasp of reality from reality itself, even in the face of death. What they're not understanding is our piece of myriad and winter evidences, which not only acts as an ontological confirmation of the incoherent nature of breath, which is the reason why the permutation is debate is preferable. They have only literally spent like 5 seconds or 10 seconds on the permutation, so I'm going to get to that here. One, combat breath is sad the affirmative, or these are net benefits to the permutation. Combat breath is sad the affirmative. The affirmation of the pathologized body, the structure, vocation,
not to decode, i.e. they locked their unflinching paradigmatic analysis is locked in the telos, they are conceding the telos is that locks blackness into the historical understandings of what blackness is, which are based on biocentric understandings of the body, which is why our piece of winter evidence is very crucial in these claims, because it to be able to understand that these are not biological codes, but our piece of winter evidence makes a distinction between biological codes and how they are transferred and considered to be universal truth, as they are non-genetic codes, and they then begin to internalize, which is our argument about the occupation of breath, in which you begin to internalize these forms of colonization at the level of sight, at the level of vision, at the level of even hearing, in which you begin to interpolate how bodies then view the world, which is why our explanation of how this I can't breathe movement, i.e. Eric Garner was shot, this is a form of the police officer had to reconcile or occupy his breath through these forms of colonization to be able to recognize or racialize Eric Garner, to be able to say that he was a nigger and shoot him. That's our understanding of how these non-generic codes or processes actually operate in the status quo, and also to that there our piece of Marriott evidence, which is what we're going to probably win on in this debate. Our Marriott 16 evidence talks about the way in which it's not a question of trying to look at the affirmative through pieces, but rather as a holistic solution, which is our understanding of how we try not to decode blackness, but rather there are multiplicity of things of overcoding blackness, both law and criminality, resisting and complicity with the advent, whether perverse, paranoid, or imaginary, or neurotic decolonial war. That's our Marriott piece. That's our Marriott 16 evidence. Now you can cross by the Hartman evidence, because at best it's a really easy way out to vote on the permutation, as they only literally spend 5 seconds just say that we just misread Hartman with no warrants or claims to the reason why this is true. And also too, we don't even need nuance and theorization, because it's a question of how we live in these spaces. They're conceding that the role of judge in this debate, you can cross by the Hartman evidence that they say that it's a misread with no warrant, but they comment rather the assertion of resistance that does not happen in safe places, but rather in the here and now, where we are in a time and place where all refugees temporarily requires us to actually rethink the meaning of abolition, not only as a not yet, but not simply as the event for which we are, not simply just as the event that we are waiting, but as the daily refusal and the awareness and care in the space of captivity, enclosure, and incarceration, to which is not an animation of effect, but rather straddling with that pathology and being able to confirm this argumentation. Now their only argumentation is the pick argument about the way in which Marriott disagrees with Winter, but we will get to, but they're still conceding the double term on the floor. I'll get to that later on the Marriott 12 evidence, but they have to still concede our piece of Marriott 11 evidence, and no contestation that Marriott doesn't disagree with Winter's reading of sociology, which has how she historicizes it and understands its origin, which is why our understanding of how the Marriott 16 evidence acts as a corrective to this understanding that the leap is something that is outside the temporal understanding. It's also too, Marriott is criticizing a other book, which is why our Winter evidence, which is in 2014, Marriott is criticizing another book, not this conversation between Catherine McKendrick and Sylvia Winter, which is why at the bottom piece of the flow it says that Winter talks about a transformative leap that is outside of teleological understanding. The 1AC Marriott evidence also criticizes the telos and event and serves as a corrective results in the impact. Marriott writes that I do not think Winter's reading is simply tenuous or inaccurate. Sociology shows how the modern self oscillates between two seemingly naturalized sets of assumptions about what it means to be human. What for non-sociology refers to how human and inferiority becomes to be read biologically solely in racial economic terms, which is why Fanon himself also used biological terms such as secretion and virus, but also too.
Q says that it is important to know how the power is fluid to some extent, even if
Q said that it's important to know how power is fluid.
So you can see that that's why the
So you can see why our historical examples of how there are different accumulations of blackness via our piece of Winter evidence is very important to understand these claims. Also too, they say that piece of line of the Agavangel evidence is Hegelian dialectic, but I don't even think they explain this argument very well. But also too, Nico rereads the Hegelian Agavangel evidence right back at you. As I reread this again, I articulate common rather the live struggle, living existential struggle that bring together the infinite and the finite without collapsing them into a monolithic process. This common breath of living disrupts and exceeds the dominant explicit spatial chasm of the ecology embodies sovereign subject or soma and flesh person and living being, the phenomenon, the numeron and political project in their society attention drive. That you should look at the Marriott 12 evidence that criticizes their double term with their Wilson evidence that they literally go conceded it, and we have flagged this argument on the top of the phone. Now you should feel the rest of the argumentation of the concession of Marriott 12 evidence. This terms they affirmative because it indicates they are affirmatively wrong. This reading of how ontology and reduces ontology to a logic of non-recoverability, but this is not what ontology is. They're reading understanding blackness through the ontology of the West as a universal logic, but this simply reifies the void of relationality at the heart of blackness. In other words, the negative theorization presumes that blackness exists, but this is false. Blackness is produced through delirium, i.e. blackness is the atmosphere produced through this body, thinking that its production is real at the ontological level has three impacts. One, Jewish the wedding of non-relationality creates a form of despair that anything that is desired to see black lived experience as the worst collapse into a form of sentimental moralism, and it's also disattached to the reasons why the pink is power poly does not solve, but also too in this way they're announced to creates a craving for violence, which intensifies into like violence in the status quo.
It's just like You know where Eric went? Or where he is?
He was in here the other day.
I'll find it.
Fries?
Fries? Yeah, I'll take some. You don't eat fries? Okay.
Actually, yes. I would like to see the piece that you're reading back to 2AR.
Huh?
That little snippet that you're referring back to in the 2AR.
Which one?
The last one, the only one that you refer back to. Whatever the two author name piece of evidence is, I don't know what it is.
Agatha Angela?
There it is.
Okay.
I got whatever.
Agatha Angela is the first and the last name.
I don't know.
Everybody. What would you like to see?
I just
Marriott,
I don't know.
Harmony.
We didn't read them. We didn't read a single one. We don't have a first and the last name. I thought it was like a two author thing. I didn't know it was like this is like Apple giving out the first name, Apple giving last name, giving out the versus like.
Thank you. No, but thank you.
My time for what? You gotta babysit me.
Thank you.
I'm a whole I'm the chaperone. I'm the chaperone.
Override.
Hello. I didn't really see it in all this tournament.
I can see you 4 times.
At this tournament?
Kendall don't fuck with me, sorry. I understand you can't fuck with everybody. Keep your circle closed. I feel it. Just because they skin folk don't mean they can't fuck.
That's a lot.
I got a lot of feelings. I need to go to therapy.
Don't we all?
Actually, I make up on my bed. I think I'm at this theory that if you black, it should be like required that you go to therapy. Like just the shit that you gotta deal with.
I need before you get 12.
Like for you. Like a black therapist is just ready for like black child psychology. It's just like I don't know.
Come here, honey.
And it's a black woman in the lobby waiting for you to come out and give you another.
I think we got no class. You know, black women don't play.
Which part of it?
That's from their evidence. I don't know if it's from ours. I can check to see. It's these multiple points of struggle.
No, this all represented.
Yeah, so it's from their piece of evidence.
Okay, yeah, well then they probably don't see that shit over there.
Who is? Who is that? Oh. It's right after. It's I articulated it already. Yeah.
That's hard, man. Oh, I marked the card. My bad. Did you want to see that Agatha Angela evidence too?
What'd you say? I'm good.
Okay. Okay.
right next door to the academic building? It's right there.
I'm on the good one.
All right there. I'm just trying to they're call that they're living on. I'm so fucking sick of that.
He's calling like people out. He's calling out the 2021 censorship of like racist, basically. He said after SAE. He said the way we responded to SAE was censorship. Apparently, like, I used to do credit He is. Can you send this link to me? Email? Yeah.
18 minutes decision time.